All right. Well, welcome everyone. So this is Poppy's after school special on oral language strategies for primary literacy learners. And we are going to get started. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering virtually today across many different traditional unceded territories across BC. And we give thanks for our hosts for this land that we're working and learning and playing on together. And I know we have a few familiar faces out there, excuse me, but I am Lisa and I am the program manager and teacher consultant for Poppy. And I'm co-presenting today with my lovely colleague, Jen Kelly. And I'm in Vancouver, Jen's up in the Shuswap area today. And we are very glad to have you here. So first off, a little bit of housekeeping. This is our website at poppy.ca. And hopefully you found the handouts there ahead of time if you got a pre-workshop email. So you can get the handouts there. If you click on that professional learning watering can, and then that left raindrop there for our e-handouts. And this is what our e-handouts page looks like. And you can see there, the oral language one is third from the top. So if you need to access that still, that's where you go. And we also did want to let you know that we're recording the session today so that we can post it to our YouTube channel next week. And we also have closed captioning available. So if you would like live captions, that's available to you in the toolbar at Zoom down at the bottom. If you're not seeing it, you can click on those 3 dots for more, and it should show you that as an option too. And then if you are using the captions, you can move it around your screen and resize and make the font bigger or smaller, which is quite cool. So we're very pleased to offer that as well. So today what we're looking at is exploring strategies for building that language capacity in our primary students and those scaffolded supports that we can use to help develop and support their thinking, their language, and their vocabulary skills. So gradually building up the complexity and sophistication of what they're able to do and providing them with strategies and routines and supports that allow them to see us modeling really wonderful thinking and communicating skills in action, and also how to tie that to literacy. So to stories and reading and writing and mentor texts and opportunities for reflection and conversation and collaboration with our classmates and with our teacher as well. So how we'll be doing that today is sharing a little bit of the theory. As always, we base everything on best practice and current research on literacy, and we want to be doing some modeling and demonstrating for you to show you what it can look like and the how, and keeping you in mind. So this is all about you and how it can work for you in your location, wherever you are in BC, and whatever role you have this year and whatever students you are supporting this year. And sorry, there we go. Now, if we were a smaller group and we were in person, oral language skills, we would definitely be having you do lots and lots of talking in small groups at your tables. But we're kind of doing something funny here, and we're having to compromise because we're virtual, because we're 125 people and we're spread out and we have an hour together. So based on all of those very real time constraints and distance, we'll be doing the modeling and demonstration and get you to interact with us, reflecting on how this could work for you and what your thoughts are, what has worked well for you, and using the chat box and other ways of being interactive. But trust and believe that if we were together, we would definitely be having you do lots and lots of talking and sharing in small groups. So that would be what we'd want to see in our classrooms. So here it's a little bit adapted. So first of all, why is talk important? I know I used to joke, I thought a quiet classroom was a beautiful thing. But there's also something really wonderful about that happy and productive buzz of kids being excited about their learning and thinking and talking. And especially in primary, when they're not really proficient and developed readers and writers yet, talking is that gateway. It gives us a window into their thinking. And talking about what we're learning and our learning experiences and sharing our questions and our wonderings does help boost memory and make associations and connections in our brain. So it supports our language development, and it's also a memory piece that helps strengthen and reinforce some of those literacy skills that we're also building at the same time. So looking at reasoning with evidence, so that scientific thinking that we want students to have, getting them primed in questioning and wondering with a critical eye, And then of course, always it helps them develop their social skills. So they can be encouraged to take risks and explore and try new things so that have payoffs for learning, but also for their social interactions in the classroom. So all of those things bundled in, and as primary teachers, that's something that we do and we have been doing for a long time, most definitely. And this quote from Marie Clay, we really like: if they can't say it, they won't be able to read or write it. So thinking about the conversation and the talking and the sharing that way about ideas and thoughts and stories and questions is a really wonderful way for them to orally rehearse what they may then turn and get onto paper in writing or drawing, or work in partners with or small groups for conversation, or how they interact with texts. And this is one of our favorites from Calvin and Hobbes. When a person pauses in mid-sentence to choose a word, that's the best time to jump in and change the subject. It's like an interception in football. You grab the other guy's idea and run the opposite way with it. The more sentences you complete, the higher you score. The idea is to block the other guy's thoughts and express your own. That's how you win. Conversations aren't contests. Okay, a point for you, but I'm still ahead. I just love that. And maybe we all have someone like Calvin in our life who thinks that conversation is a competition.
So I'm going to share with you a few effective routines for developing oral language so that we don't have a competition around conversation in our classrooms. So one of the main things, I'll just touch on a few here, is making that intentional time to have purposeful talk and also active listening. So really making the time for that. And I know our days are very busy, and I know our schedules are incredibly busy with our students and what we cover on a daily basis, but having that time set aside for intentional talk and listening and interaction is really important for our students to see the value in it and to have that practice time. As Lisa mentioned, it's also about having those open-ended questions and asking the questions that our students can think deeply about and express their ideas about. She also mentioned that the reading and writing activities, having that scaffolded into our oral language, is incredibly important for our students to talk out our thinking and make those connections in the brain. So we're going to be modeling some of that for you today too. And then just, looking at that new vocabulary and having those language games available for our students to play around with oral language and to learn by doing. So I just touched on a few of those key routines, but I'm going to have you start to think more about them in the next slide. So I think, yes, here we go. So thinking about those routines that we just talked about, we want to get your ideas and what is important to you and what's beneficial to you as a teacher. So what we're going to have you do is come up with 4 words that you think best conveys what is needed to develop students' language skills. Then you're going to choose 2 of those from the 4 to narrow it down even more. And then finally, you'll have 1 word that best describes how you can support oral language in the classroom. So if we were together, of course, we would be doing this a lot through talking and through, learning from others and getting different perspectives. So we're going to have you to have some reflective time now. And I'll just show you an example of what this looks like before I tell you about how we're going to share. So as you can see, this is like a 4-2-1. You've probably used this strategy with your students before, but it's a great way to narrow our thinking down. So 4 words, 2 of those words, and then 1 word. And what we're going to have you do with that is then put that 1 word into the chat box when you come up with it. So we're giving you 2 minutes to do this activity. You'll come up with 1 word at the end of it. And when the timer goes off and the music finishes, we'll have you press enter for the chat box, and then we'll get a waterfall cascade of all of the words that you think are the most beneficial. We get a collective reflection. Okay, did I miss anything there, Lisa?
No, I was just going to say that hopefully most people have either the e-handout or the print handout so they can be referring to the words in the blue boxes separately from the screen. So if not, I can go back and show that one more time if anybody needs to take a picture of it or a screenshot to have those on hand for while you're doing your reflecting in this time. So I'm just going to go back one.
That's a great idea.
Mom, where's my charger?
Your what?
My charger for my iPad.
So there we go. If you need to get a snapshot of those, this is what you're looking at to pull out your 4 and then your 2 and then your 1. And we'll show this again. There we go.
Put on some mood music and you have 2 minutes to do this activity. And waterfall, look at them all. Love it, love it. Okay, thank you so much. Really interesting to see like the similarities between the words and some interesting ideas that I hadn't thought of. So thank you so much. As we continue on, feel free to go back through the chat box and notice what your colleagues wrote about the importance of developing oral language in the classroom, and maybe you'll come up with something that you hadn't thought of before or something that you're connecting to. Okay, so we will continue on there. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So
these are amazing.
Yeah, aren't they? I love the waterfall share. So our students need opportunities to develop their oral language in many different ways in the classroom. So whether they're practicing as a whole class or as an individual one-on-one situation, they're going to need to know how to develop those skills and what is the best way to communicate with others, whether it's whole group or one-on-one, because it's going to be different set of rules for those. So having those different opportunities for our students is really important to reinforce their language development. And teachers have some tools that they can use to really help. So a lot of the ways that we can really scaffold this for our students and help are through talk formats and talk moves. So I'm going to talk more in detail about talk formats in a moment, but that's basically how you can guide your students through grouping and allowing them to have those different ways that they're interacting, whole class, small group, or one-on-one. And talk moves is really about focusing in on the content that you're talking about and providing opportunities for students to maybe talk with each other or in large groups in ways that they hadn't thought of before, maybe the ways they haven't practiced before. Maybe it's through debate, or maybe it's through backing up their opinion with their ideas, or listening to others and changing opinions, things like that. So those ways help us to introduce our students to new ways of conversing with each other. And you're going to see examples of that in a video that we'll show you in a little while, but it's one of the ways that we can support our students. Now with talk formats, we can look at a whole class discussion where the teacher is really modeling and guiding that space to be safe and inclusive for our students to voice their opinions in a public venue, which maybe they hadn't had a chance to do before. So the teacher is really in charge of making that inclusive, safe place and ensuring that there's equal amount of time and basically making sure that there's not one student who's monopolizing the whole discussion, which we know happens sometimes. So that's what a teacher can do in that time. It also works really well for inquiry, having that whole class discussion during that time. Now, there's also an opportunity to have small group discussion where maybe 3 or 4 of our students are gathering together to discuss. During that time, the teacher can be circulating through the class, doing some guiding, ensuring that all students have a voice, and allowing that guided practice to come to light within our classrooms. And then of course we have partner talk, and this is a really important one for our students to practice. It might be the one that they've had a lot of practice with, but it's also very effective to set up expectations and guidelines for partner talk. But it's really effective because our students are 100% into participation at that time. They're either speaking or listening or thinking. So it's a high value way for our students to develop their oral language skills. So it's also very important for us to come up with authentic ways that we can have our students engage in conversation in our classrooms. We have a lot of different conversations in math and in literacy. We're going to talk about book talks in a moment as well. But anytime that we can have that authentic conversation, that is often informal, and our students can engage in that and really practice. So I'll turn it over to you, Lisa, for the morning meeting.
Yeah, one thing I did, I taught mostly grade 2 and 3, but also I taught 4 and 5 for a while. And I started out using this morning meeting with my primaries. And then I found that my intermediate kids loved it as well. So especially in September, it really helped bond our students and create that climate of trust and safety in the classroom. And we just took 10 minutes or less to do it. And the format, and this is out of the book, The First 6 Weeks of School. I believe the author's last name is Denton, and there's a primary version and an intermediate one. But yeah, just a greeting. The kids can choose if they want to do a high five or a handshake or clap or sing. Everyone does some sharing. And I used to have 5 kids go every day. So 5 certain kids knew that Monday was always their day to share, and we rotated through. So by Friday, I'd have gotten through 25 students. And so in September, it was, how was your summer? What was something interesting you did on the summer? If you had a souvenir, maybe if you were at the beach and you got a shell, or your friend sent you a postcard from Disneyland, things like that. And then their peers could ask questions. And so that was a really nice way for the kids to learn about things about each other. And then at recess, it's like, I didn't know your grandma lived in Hawaii. I've been to Hawaii before. Let's talk about Hawaii. It was really cool. And then we could build in a group activity. So it could be anything. It could be a yoga stretch, it could be dancing, it could be something to do with reading or writing or science. And same thing with news and announcements. It would then launch into a little bit of a calendar activity that shifted into maybe a shared writing or a shared reading activity or read aloud.
Thanks,
And
Lisa.
yeah, I think it just, yeah, it encouraged cooperation and inclusion. It built up communication skills, and you could vary it every day, but it was a very predictable format, and the kids really grew to love it. And they loved being able to share, and they loved hearing what their peers were sharing as well.
Absolutely, that sounds wonderful. Thank you. And some people are already popping into the chat box some ideas for authentic conversations. So I'll just share about the weekly picnic lunch while you're doing that. So this was a colleague of mine that I worked with. She taught grade 1, and she would have weekly picnic lunches with her students to practice conversation skills. So they would all go into the multipurpose room and sit around a large table, kind of mimicking the dinner table conversation idea. And they practiced conversing while they were eating lunch. And often, you know, there'd be talk. She would have to model and guide a little bit. So if someone said something totally off topic, then she could say, oh, wow, actually, we're talking about our field trip to the skating rink right now. Do you have anything that you'd like to contribute about that? So it's very intentional to talk about the rules of conversing, but it also reinforced, you know, when is it an appropriate time to change the topic? What kind of questions can we ask to elicit the most information from our classmates? And she said that her students absolutely love this time, because it brought them together as a community, and they, like Lisa said, got to learn a lot about their classmates, but in that intentional talk kind of way. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for all of the ideas in the chat box. Please make sure that you're looking through those and getting lots of ideas for your classroom as well.
And even though we're past the first 6 weeks of school, it has great stuff that you could jump in and start using at any point. There we go. All right, we want to show this video, and this is from Edutopia. And it's on oracy in the classroom. So teaching effective speaking skills and creating strategies for effective talk in the classroom. It will give you an example of a few different classes. They are a little bit older, but there definitely are some grade 3 students, or as they say in the UK, they're in year 3, and their accents are adorable. So we'll watch this, and then afterwards we will break down some of the strategies that they use and just walk through those. Just love that video. Really wonderful. Yeah, the proof of listening is great. I'm just looking at the comments here. Yeah. So breaking down a few of the key ones that they talked about in the video, those discussion guidelines, talking points, and sentence stems. And next we will walk through those, breaking down a few examples of what that can look like, and then have that lead into a connection with a read aloud. So with the discussion guidelines, it's working with the students so they help contribute to possible suggestions for what the guidelines are, and then together you decide on a class set, kind of like having class rules, but talking about it. So even that reflecting and the thinking about it, plus the conversation and deciding if you're going to choose, say, 5 or 6, which they'll be, is a really wonderful process for the kids to get involved in. And that can be something you could do even with your kindergartens, grade 1s, and the language might be more simple than it would be if you used it with your 2s or 3s or your 4 or 5s, your intermediate students. So these are taken right from the video. And I really love that. If someone's not talking in the group, instead of going, hey, Josh isn't talking, he's not saying anything, which I've had lots of kids who would do that. How lovely and graceful to invite someone by saying, Josh, we haven't heard from you yet. What do you think about this? And if he's shy and anxious, hopefully he would just say, not sure, but he might have just been waiting for that opening too. So teaching our kids to make that invitation is a really lovely gesture. Proof of listening. I know I need to have some adults that could still work on flexing that skill. Respecting each other's ideas. We're going to clarify, challenge, summarize, and build on each other's ideas, and also be open-minded and prepared to change our mind. With talking points, and you can see she did that in the video, and if you dig into their resources and you look at the video on YouTube, it does link out to some Blackline Masters and things that they use. And so what they've done there, and when she said some cultures are better than others, that was their example of stating a controversial statement, so something that's sort of a bit of an eye-opener or interesting, instead of a yes/no question, and inviting the students to discuss it. So for example, would you rather be too hot or too cold? And the why. So rather than just saying too hot, that's done, you have to give evidence or reasoning and back up your choice. Nonfiction books are better than fiction books. Dinosaurs are cooler than sharks. Would you rather have a party or go on a trip, and why? I think in this day and age, so late in the pandemic, I think we'd be thrilled with either. And vegetables are better than desserts. That is a very controversial statement as far as I'm concerned. So if we were face to face in a smaller group, we'd have you in breakout rooms and have you debate and discuss some of these in a small group or with a partner. I know if I was still in the classroom, I would invite my students to come up with some of these would you rather questions, and these challenges, taking nonfiction against fiction, even having a little hat or a box and we could draw out of, and then we could, as we went through the week, this would be a neat thing to be doing when they're lined up to go to gym or the library or coming back from recess, and just get them thinking and talking. And again, if they're all in little partnerships, 100% engagement, and everyone's either listening or talking and everybody's thinking. And then with sentence stems, this is a very clear and explicit scaffolded support. So as sentence starters to help them build a richer vocabulary and start to speak in full sentences and interact with one another in a more sophisticated and complicated way. And we saw this in the video, students saying, I think, or linking to what you just said. And that boy said, I see your point, Adiba, but I'm going to build on that with, or he countered with something. And that, again, it shows very respectful discourse and conversation. And what do you mean by is a really nice way of questioning someone about their thinking to explain more rather than, I don't get it. So it kind of can flip some of those interactions where the students can be working together and there might be little hiccups or road bumps, and gives everybody those tools. This could be an anchor chart, and the students could be referring to these when they're working on their own and with small groups and partnerships. So rather than just waiting for that other person to finish talking so they can start talking, we really are listening to hear and understand, and we're getting our kids to practice that rather than just, I'm just waiting for you to stop talking so I can say what I think. So kind of helping shift them out of the egocentric and self-oriented way, really to be listening to and focusing on what another is saying. So those listening skills being just as key as the talking part of communication.
So one way that we can really set up that intentional talk for our students is through having book talks. We're already, having such rich literacy conversations in our classrooms around books. So having our students, inviting our students to take part in that and take leadership in those book talks is really a great way to set aside that time for intentional talk. So one thing that this does when we're looking at fiction and nonfiction is with fiction, we can really dig into our opinions, our thoughts on character development, plot, all of those deeper comprehension skills that we can talk about through the book talks. And through nonfiction, we can really dig into connecting to prior knowledge and looking at evidence-based information and analyzing information. So this is a really great way for our students to try out a lot of different kinds of talk and also support their literacy development through reading and writing about.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned, the fiction and the nonfiction, Lisa and I are going to be modeling a book talk around fiction and nonfiction, and there could be different kinds of conversation starters that we have through the different kinds of books that we are reading. So it's something great to notice. What kind of comprehension strategies are we touching on through fiction? What topics are we touching on? Like we might be talking more about social emotional learning as we're talking through the book. And with nonfiction, where we could be talking a lot about those, as I mentioned, connecting to prior knowledge, but also looking at vocabulary and how that enhances our understanding. It can also be looking at our preferences and our opinions and why that is. So we're going to be modeling a little bit of that through the next little while. And we'll ask you to really notice the types of conversation that we're having and anything about our conversation that might be different through fiction, nonfiction, something that maybe you hadn't thought about or that you're really picking up that we are doing through this interactive book talk in the next couple of minutes. We decided to, with this interactive read aloud, just to stop the book at certain places and have short little conversations, just so that time-wise and also that we are modeling this for you. This is a great way to involve your students to even model a conversation with another adult and have them become conversation detectives and really notice those guidelines that you're following through your conversations. Okay, so the first book that we're going to take a look at is something very appropriate for developing oral language, is Say Something. This is a fabulous book. If you haven't read it before, you're in for a treat. And as I mentioned before, just jot down in your notes what you noticed about our conversation, and we're going to come back to that after we do these read alouds and have some sharing about what you have noticed. Hopefully you have some noticings that you're going to be able to share with us. So you'll probably notice that there was some different conversations happening between fiction and nonfiction. We're going to give you again a timer, a 30-second timer, and we'll have you think about sorry, Lisa, could you just advance it one more? There we go. Think about one thing that you noticed about our conversations in the chat box. So maybe it's something that you noticed between the difference between fiction, nonfiction, or something, you know, as a conversation detective that you really focused in on. So you have 30 seconds. Again, it will be a waterfall sharing. So type it into the chat box, what you noticed. And when the 30 seconds is over and the music stops, then press enter. Oh, fantastic. Look at you guys. Excellent, excellent detective work.
Seeing a lot of connecting and connections, yeah.
Absolutely. Connections to personal experiences, yeah, for sure. Changing of opinions due to, you know, hearing different information, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good stuff. So I'll let you continue to look through those and see what your colleagues picked up on, and maybe so there's something that's surprising or something that you're really connecting to. And we'll just continue on for the time's sake. So as we just wrap up the session today, we just want to point out how important it is for our students to learn through talking. Not only do our students get the chance to voice their opinion in a public kind of way so that they're talking through their thinking, but also they're able to hear other people's perspectives and other people's ideas to perhaps even change their mind about something or give them more information. So the whole speaking, listening, and thinking is hugely important in our classrooms, and is a wonderful way to really focus in on those deep thinking skills.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So just as we shift towards our wrap up, a really important part of our workshops is getting feedback from you on what activities or routines, resources, strategies resonated with you, and also what you might be most likely to try in your classroom next week. What feels the most accessible, or you click with, you have a connection, or you think, yeah, that's something I'm already doing, maybe I can add to it. So if you're comfortable sharing that in the chat box, we would love to hear the one thing that you might take away from this. So this is a summary. We did that 4-2-1 activity, narrowing down from 4 to 2 to 1 word on effective routines for oral language development. It was really neat to see with such a large group how many different one single words you got down to, but so much of it was around discussion and listening and modeling and questioning. So really wonderful themes there. And part of what we do with that 4-2-1 is to build on that. Whatever your one word was, how does that show up in your classroom, or what routines or planning or structures do you have in place to ensure that there's time for that? So whether your word was discussions or listening or demonstrations or games or play, how is that evidenced in your planning when you consider opportunities for all of your students to engage in talking and listening and speaking and thinking together? So in the Oracy in the Classroom video, they highlighted the discussion guidelines you can create with your kids, talking points to have that controversial or interesting statement to debate. Would you rather? What's your preference? Sentence stems, which we then showed how that could work as to talk about, reflect on a book that you read together, and then different ways that you can group your students to mix up the dynamics and have short bursts of conversation. And then that part at the end, Jen and I modeling those conversations around fiction and nonfiction. So thinking about how you can incorporate those into your literacy block to help students strengthen their oral language skills as it ties to literacy, also how it ties to the social emotional core competencies and that kind of learning as well, the good people stuff. Thank you for sharing. It looks like we've got quite a few people saying what they're going to share.
The sentence
and that's
stems
definitely
seem very
helpful for us.
Sentence stems seems very popular. That's great.
Yep, yep, wonderful. Here are the sources that we use to pull together this workshop. So the books and the info links and the videos. So you can check those out if you're interested in exploring or researching more. And again, there was at the first 6 weeks of school, and the author's last name is Denton, if you are interested in tracking that down or seeing if your school or district might have it. And then finally, here's our contact info. If you are looking for additional resources, we welcome you always to check out what we've got on our website. We've got the 4 apples on our tree on the homepage, and we've split those into reading, writing, oral language, and word work. So you could check out the oral language resources there or any of the other ones. But you can also email us and get in touch if you're looking for any strategies or anything we mentioned or anything you're wondering about. We do also love to, if you try something out with your students and let us know how it goes. So we love to hear if you tried a book or an activity or sentence stems and what kind of impact that had on your students. We'd love to hear that too. So we love hearing those stories and getting evidence of things happening in classrooms. And we are going to leave you with this lovely video called Piper. So as you head out for the rest of your day, Jen and I really want to thank you for joining us after a full day's work already. And thank you for being here, and take good care. And we hope that you'll keep in touch.